Bună seara, doamnelor și domnilor, și bine v-am regăsit la o nouă ediție a emisiunii Punctul pe azi. NATO va fi alături de Ucraina oricât de mult va fi nevoie, a declarat adjunctul asistentului secretarului general pentru operațiuni al NATO, Burcu San, într-un interviu în exclusivitate pentru TVR Moldova. În ceea ce privește Chișinăul, reprezentanta NATO a declarat că, citez, Republica Moldova se află pe scaunul șoferului și poate avea orice tip de relație cu NATO pe care și-o dorește. Vă invit să vizionăm împreună acest interviu în exclusivitate pentru TVR, după care vom reveni în studio alături de invitatul nostru, expertul politic și militar de la București, Mihai Isac. Dar haideți să vedem mai întâi interviul. Hello, and first of all, let me thank you for your kindness to give us this interview exclusively for TVR Moldova. We are here today with the NATO Deputy Assistant Secretary General for Operation, Madam Burcu San. Hello, and thank you again for this opportunity.
Well, thank you very much. It's my second visit in this capacity to Moldova, and I really like your country. I appreciate the kindness of the people, the food, the wine, as we were speaking about, and it's really good to be here.
First question, the Deputy Secretary General of NATO, Mr. Mircea Joană, recently stated that Moldova could have any relations with NATO that it wants. How do you assess the relationship between Moldova and NATO today?
Well, Moldova is a long-standing partner of NATO, and we have had prospering relations, if I may say, for some time now, and our practical cooperation is growing. You mentioned Deputy Secretary General Joanna. He met several ministers from your country in the recent past. The Secretary General met your president during the Munich Security Conference. We are expecting the foreign minister to join the Vilnius summit. So clearly we are having deeper political consultations and dialogue. We exchange views, and we want to understand better Moldova's interests, security interests. And then the practical cooperation is also strengthening. We have a number of projects and initiatives, for instance, cyber defense or security, civil preparedness, good governance, training, logistics. So it is a prospering relationship, and Moldova is in the driver's seat. You quoted the Deputy Secretary General. Moldova can have any relationship it wants. So clearly we have Moldova as the ownership of this relationship, and we can go as far as Moldova would like to.
What are the development prospects of these relations, considering that Moldova has a principle of military neutrality written into its constitution? We know that in general, neutral of Europe, which are not part of NATO, invest heavily in the defense sector.
So Moldova's constitutional neutrality is something that we fully respect, and we also strongly support Moldova's territorial integrity and sovereignty. Neutrality and cooperation are not mutually exclusive. As you know, we also have partners, mutual partners, for instance, Austria or Switzerland, with whom we cooperate quite deeply. So this is not a zero-sum game, and neutrality is fully compatible with cooperation, increased cooperation with NATO, both, as I said, in political dialogue and practical cooperation. For neutral states or any state, they have a unique security situation that they have to respond to, and that security situation can evolve over time. And Moldova most recently, for instance, decided to join the European Union. It has now the candidate status. We are happy NATO allies and EU member states together are supporting Moldova in this regard. For instance, for NATO, we have good governance programs, as I said, that can also support Moldova's future membership in the European Union. So this is a cooperation within the constraints or within the limits that Moldova would like to impose, which is its own neutrality. We fully respect that.
And how do you assess this participation in Lebanon? So far, they just started last year.
So this is a UN-led operation. We are not particularly engaged as NATO, but clearly any international participation plays into Moldova's role as a security provider. So this is much appreciated overall, globally.
How do you evaluate the joint exercises with the NATO member states where Moldova participates? There are also governments. There were also some issues in the past that the Moldovan soldiers were not allowed to participate in such exercises. But I want to ask you how important it is for a soldier to always stay ready and ready to carry out its mission after all.
Absolutely. The participation of Moldova in exercises along with NATO or partner countries is very useful for Moldova. It is of course for Moldova to assess this, but from our perspective, the more Moldova can participate in such exercises, the more it is exposed to NATO countries' own standards, doctrines, training and exercise principles, and this can only enrich their experience, and also of course contributes to interoperability between different forces, which in turn would, for instance, make Moldova's contribution to a force like KFOR or in Lebanon more effective.
How important is for a soldier to be ready and to participate in consecutive exercises like this to maintain its readiness in case of the worst case scenario, of course?
It is very important. We find that very important for allied soldiers. So we have, in keeping with our strengthened deterrence and defense posture, also increased our exercises and also are doing bigger exercises as well. So as you mentioned, this is a very important component of readiness. You need to know as a soldier what you're expected to do in which circumstances. So to exercise different scenarios on a regular basis only contributes to the readiness of the soldiers.
Moldova started this year to make essential investments in the defense area because of the war of its proximity. This year alone, the defense budget has increased by 70%. How do you assess these efforts of Chișinău in making a better defense sector?
It is true that many European countries, including Moldova, have not been spending much on defense for some years now. Within the alliance, we reversed that trend since 2014, and many allies are actually investing more and more in deterrence and defense. And that, of course, strengthens our collective deterrence and defense within NATO. And from that perspective, Moldova has made its own assessment and has decided to invest more in defense, spend more in defense. So this is, of course, I think good for Moldova's own deterrence and defense going forward. Its ability to defend its national security interests, its ability to defend and protect its political independence. And we in NATO, within our long-standing partnership with Moldova, stand ready to help Moldova to spend more effectively, invest more wisely, so we can always, of course, exchange views in this regard.
What kind of military equipment do you see investment necessary in Moldova, in the sense of what Moldova has to buy for itself, in the sense of making a better army?
This is for the Moldovan Defense Ministry to determine. I know that there's also a national security strategy being worked out by the Moldovan different institutions under the guidance of the presidency. So I believe that strategy will also guide different policies of different ministries, including the defense ministry, and from there, with the threat assessment that Moldova makes, it will also make decisions on which equipment to invest in.
How NATO can contribute to these reforms on the defense sector in Moldova if the authorities in Chișinău will ask for such expertise from NATO allies?
We have, of course, expertise in deterrence and defense matters, as do allies. So when the Moldovan authorities ask for assistance or advice, we're able to reach out to allies or to our own experts within the headquarters, and we can of course provide advice, assistance, training, and from NATO we can also provide a number of non-lethal equipment as well. And the allies are able to provide equipment or training within their own bilateral cooperation programs. Plus there's the European Union and the European Peace Fund, Stability Fund, and this will also be used, I believe, to fund a number of equipment purchases or procurement by Moldova.
Speaking of allies, recently Germany donated a lot of armored vehicles to Moldova. Can we expect other similar helps from other NATO member state countries in the near future for Moldova?
Moldova is very much invited to use NATO as a forum for reaching out to the allies. Of course, all 31 allies and our invitee Sweden are meeting regularly in the headquarters, and Moldova sometimes comes and joins committee meetings and makes presentations and also presents what its needs are going forward. So this is a good platform to raise awareness among the allies, and then allies are of course stepping up to help Moldova as necessary.
Moldova openly requested the support of its Western partners, including NATO members, to have an air defense system in the context in which several missiles already flew over the Moldovan space on their way to the targets in Ukraine. How necessary is this help for Moldova to have this defense air system?
So we see, especially with this war in Ukraine, that air defense and air surveillance are actually quite vital. As Moldova, you've described it, is very close to this theater of war, unfortunately. So I would say Moldova's decision to invest in air defense is wise. There's a surveillance radar I know is going to be procured via the European Peace Facility. We also have some non-lethal equipment that can be used in this regard. Some projects are in the pipeline. Also, NATO has helped with air surveillance by deploying our early warning and control aircraft during the European Political Community Summit here in Chisinau recently on the 1st of June. So I think with the EU, with allies, with partners, with NATO, we are here to help Moldova in its quest to increase its air defenses.
How do you assess the relation between NATO and Russia today? Because from outside it doesn't seem like a very good one, but as you are an official of NATO, you can tell us more about it.
So Russia has started this brutal war in Ukraine. This was completely unwarranted. It is, of course, illegal, illegitimate in all its forms. And so we very much condemn that. And Ukraine is fighting admirably for its right of self-defense. This is something that is enshrined in the UN Charter. And so Ukraine is exercising this right to defend itself. NATO is very much supporting Ukraine, and we are going to support Ukraine for however long it takes. Allies are providing many weapon systems, equipment, and also the training that goes with it to Ukraine. We at NATO, we have a quite large initiative about non-lethal military assistance. These are anything from food to military rations to medical kits and ambulances and bridges. So we are fully engaged in supporting Ukraine so that it can prevail, because this is a war that Russia has started that has to end favorably to Ukraine. So with that in mind, of course, we realize that Russia has made two big mistakes. Strategic mistakes. One was to underestimate the Ukrainian will to fight, the Ukrainian resistance and resilience. And the other one was to underestimate NATO's unity and generally, the Western unity to help Ukraine prevail. And that's why we believe, for however long it takes, we are going to stand with Ukraine.
As far as I saw, personally, Russia wanted to divide Europe and NATO members, and actually obtained the opposite effect of it. The EU looks more consolidated today, and also the NATO members are more close today than ever, maybe.
I would say this is very true. We also have, for instance, Finland and Sweden joining NATO. These were countries with hundreds of years, well...
In case of Sweden, 200 years. 200
years of neutrality in their tradition, and yet Putin's strategic mistake made them rethink their policy, and they are now becoming a member of NATO on their path to NATO membership, and Finland has already joined. This is another demonstration of how wrong Putin was. We are stronger together, and the European Union and NATO are as unified as ever to withstand this Russian attack and aggression.
Do you still have channels open with Russia regarding, I don't know, any talks, or do you still have that?
For deconfliction and in order to minimize risks of misunderstanding, there can be diplomatic channels that can be used. But our main message to Russia is, of course, that we will defend every inch of Allied territory. We have been strengthening our deterrence and defense. We have been deploying much more forces, air, land, maritime and cyber defense forces in our eastern flank. So the message is very clear. There's no room for misunderstanding or deliberate attack on NATO territory.
One of the biggest threats of Moldova's security is the hybrid war waged by Russia against Moldova. We are referring here in particular to propaganda, disinformation and cyber attacks. How can NATO help Moldova in this regard, and after we know that the EU has already sent a civil mission to Chisinau, whose primary mission is to counter and increase resilience in the face of these threats?
This is something we are very attuned to. Not a day goes by that Russia doesn't use rhetoric that is threatening and is trying to destabilize Moldova and other countries as well. So NATO and allies are determined to help Moldova to strengthen its defense and security capabilities so that it can withstand external malign influence. And as you mentioned, hybrid warfare is used by Russia a lot. I know that the European Partnership Mission, the head whom I met
Mr. Dinescu, who is a Romanian diplomat.
Exactly. They are focused on this to help Moldova withstand hybrid attacks. We from NATO are also working on strengthening resilience of Moldovan society. So we have a number of initiatives that we can take in this regard. One of the tools that they use is, as you pointed out, disinformation, and strategic communications is indeed part of our program with Moldova as well.
Do you think the Stratcom, the strategic communication, can be enhanced in Moldova? Because there are a lot of complaints somehow that the authorities do not have such a good experience in this domain. And I want to ask you if NATO can help in this regard, Moldova.
NATO can help, and Moldova also is helping itself. And NATO is there to support that. So we have a professional development program for civil servants and civil staff in the different Moldovan ministries. In fact, I just opened this morning a vignette to inform and train civil servants in strategic communications. It is a program that has been going on already for 3 days, and today was another vignette that was opened. In fact, we have a Center of Excellence on Strategic Communications. They are the best experts that we have who have come here to train Moldovan civil servants in the strategic communications, which there are a number of techniques and tactics that one can use. And the end game and objective of this training program is that to build the capacity of the Moldovan civil service to train its own civil servants in the future. But I believe this is something that the Moldovan civil servants, the ministries and the leaders are paying a lot of attention to. So I'm very optimistic that we will see a big capacity in this regard in Moldova going forward.
Russian propaganda presents NATO as a scarecrow in front of the Moldovan citizens. How could be done so that NATO's image will no longer be distorted by the Russian propaganda in Moldova, and the alliance should be presented in its true colors as a defense alliance as it is today?
I think our biggest main tool is the truth. And the truth is that NATO is a defensive alliance, a political military alliance. It is based on values of democracy and the rule of law. So it's good that I have this opportunity to debunk some of these propaganda elements. For instance, joining NATO is a sovereign decision of each country. There's been no member state or ally in the past who's joined by force or by coercion. Exactly. So they have all made their own decision, went through their own parliamentary processes, sometimes referenda, to decide whether or not to join NATO, and that's only how they joined NATO. Then, of course, all the allied countries also need to agree, because joining NATO is a very important decision. It's an important responsibility. You know about Article 5, an attack on one nation is an attack on all.
The Musketeer principle.
The Three Musketeers principle. So when you join, you must take the commitment to defend 31 countries, as well as your own. So it's not a decision to be taken lightly, but many nations have made that decision, have taken that responsibility, and NATO has only grown stronger by the addition of each new ally. Also, another propaganda element is that NATO is using partnership tools to influence different countries, but in fact the partner countries are in the driver's seat, and they determine the extent of the relationship with NATO, and they make their requirements and their needs known, and then we see how we can match those needs. So it is them who actually make the decisions on what kind of relationship they have and the extent of their partnership. It's, I think, very important, and the job you do as journalists is very important. The more the Moldovan public can understand deterrence, defense, security matters, NATO as an alliance, the less they will be exposed, or they will be influenced by disinformation and malign activities. So it's very important for the public to also increase its capacity to distinguish between what is reliable information and what is disinformation.
At the B9 summit in Bratislava, NATO's eastern flank allies called for the strengthening of NATO's eastern flank, especially in the Black Sea area. We are talking here about Romania and Bulgaria. How important it is to have strengthened defense not only in the Baltic states, but also in the Black Sea, where Russia has a massive military presence.
Indeed, the strategic concept that we agreed in Madrid last year in July also identifies the Black Sea as one of the strategically very important regions for NATO. We see that everything is interdependent, all the regions are interdependent. That's why in NATO we talk about deterrence and defense 360 degrees. We are not only focused on one nation, one region, but on different regions, and the Black Sea is of course one of them. There's, as you say, an aggressive build-up by Russia. This is influencing the security of the littoral states, the allies, of course, Bulgaria, Romania, Turkey, also Georgia, of course Ukraine, which is unfortunately experiencing this aggression from Russia, also from the Black Sea. And Russia uses the Black Sea to go to the Mediterranean, other regions as well. And Moldova is also very close to this region. We have stepped up, indeed, our presence in the region. In Bulgaria and Romania, we have established battle groups. And in line with the summit decisions from last year from Madrid, these battle groups are going to be able to be stepped up to a brigade level, and some exercises are taking place now to this effect as well. We have also enhanced air policing in the region. So we are present, we are also increasing our presence there and deterrence and defense over there as well.
There is always talk of military aid to Ukraine from EU and NATO states. Do you consider the military assistance that Ukraine receives today as sufficient? Can the NATO states do more about it in the sense of delivering military equipment necessary for the Ukraine to resist these days?
There's a big willingness to continue to assist Ukraine. The European Union, NATO, allies, European Union member states, they have all been very active in this regard. There have been billions of euros worth of weapons and equipment donated to Ukraine. And Ukrainian needs have evolved throughout the war. And so the deliveries have also evolved. At first it was more like anti-tank equipment. Now it's more heavier weapons as well, heavier systems, tanks. There's of course the initiative for provision of jets. So as the Ukrainian needs have evolved, so did the assistance, and the assistance have matched the needs. We as NATO, as an organization, we are providing non-lethal military assistance, and all this is making a difference on the battlefield every day. First of all, of course, it's the Ukrainian bravery and their creative use of any weapons, any tools that they have. But secondly, this help that has been flowing into Ukraine has been very instrumental in making sure that Ukraine continues its battlefield successes.
Yes. Should we expect a prolonged war? U.S. Defense Secretary Lloyd Austin recently said, and I quote, the war in Ukraine is a marathon, not a sprint, and that America will stand with Ukraine for this long haul. How do you rate the duration of this war?
It's been already 16 months in the going, so clearly it's not a sprint. But the message is that we are there to support this marathon. So we are here for the long haul with Ukraine, and we will support Ukraine for as long as it takes. We're also, of course, looking at the aftermath of the war. It's very important in the short term to help Ukraine for as long as the war starts or lasts, to that it can prevail. And it can have a settlement that is just and fair for Ukraine. But also we have a multi-year strategic transition program which will continue to bring Ukraine closer to NATO and more interoperability with NATO. So this is a multi-year program with a robust funding and a number of projects and initiatives, and the idea is very much to break this toxic cycle of Russian aggression every few years, and to help Ukraine have enduring deterrence and defense against Russia.
I want to speak more with you about as you previously mentioned, the NATO summit in Vilnius. What will be the main topics that the allies will address, and what are the expectations in general from this summit? What problems will be discussed with priority?
So at Vilnius, when our leaders meet, they will once again take decisions to strengthen the alliance and to make it more agile. First of all, we have our deterrence and defense initiatives, of course, from our posture to our plans to our forces and command structure and prepositioning of supplies, enhance the defense industrial capacity. There will be a number of decisions taken. And then we also want to give again a very strong signal of support, long-lasting, everlasting support to Ukraine. Multi-year transition program that I mentioned is part of this to strengthen our interoperability, bring Ukraine even closer to NATO. We are also politically stepping up our relationship with Ukraine. The NATO-Ukraine Commission will be transitioned into a NATO-Ukraine Council, where Ukraine will sit together with the allies as equal partners and discuss matters of high importance. And thirdly, I would mention our partners, including Moldova, which we will continue to support, both politically and practically. And we would like to strengthen our ability to help our partners like Moldova to withstand the Russian pressure, especially hybrid pressure that they are facing.
We watched last year for the first time that Moldova was included in the final declaration of this summit. So should we expect to talk a little more about Moldova this year also in Vilnius?
Moldova has been, in fact, mentioned in summit declarations very frequently. Madrid was not the first time, and it will certainly not be the last. I do expect that the final communique will, of course, mention Moldova, especially support to sovereignty and territorial integrity, which has always been a very important point for all the allies.
And our last question is about the last member, to say so, of the North Atlantic Alliance. It's about Sweden, a country which kept its neutrality for about 200 years and wants to become soon a NATO member. What gain it would be for the alliance to have such a country in its ranks? Can you tell us more about how NATO can receive Sweden as soon as possible?
Sweden is a very strong partner. It has been a very, very close partner to NATO, along with Finland. We have cooperated on a variety of issues with Sweden in the past. Sweden has also contributed to our operations and missions from Afghanistan, which no longer, of course, is a NATO operation, but to Kosovo and many big exercises as well. And Sweden is a very resilient state. Like Finland, I think it's something like a role model for also other allies. So it will bring with it a number of different capacities, a strong defense industry, a strong resilient society, a good partnership within its country with the private sector when it comes to civil preparedness. So it will certainly strengthen the alliance. If you look at the map, also, of course, the Baltic Sea region will be more secure with Sweden inside. And, of course, Sweden will be more secure as well within NATO.
Do you have a message for the Moldovan citizens regarding NATO? Because as we spoke so far, NATO is seen by a part of the population as equal to war or something like in bad colors. What do you say to them, to those who are skeptical about NATO?
I would say that NATO is a defensive alliance. It is very respectful of Moldova's neutrality. It is respectful also, of course, of Moldova's territorial integrity and sovereignty. And Moldova is in the driver's seat. We stand ready to help in any way that Moldova would like NATO to help.
Madam Burcu San, thank you very much for your kindness and giving us today this interview. We wish you a fruitful discussion in Vilnius and hope Moldova will be more secure in this relation with NATO in the future.
Thank you very much.